Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Broadway Buzz, the podcast where we bring you conversations with the incredible artists who shaped the world of theater. Today's guest is playwright, actor, composer, and lyricist Douglas Lyons. As a performer, he's appeared on Broadway in The Book of Mormon, Beautiful, The Carole King musical, and Parade. As a writer, he's brought audiences unforgettable pieces with Chicken and Biscuits, his first play on Broadway, the critically acclaimed Table 17, and the original musical Beau, which recently completed its off-Broadway run after transferring to a second theater. Today, we're going to discuss his journey from being a Broadway actor to a Broadway playwright, the inspiration behind his work, why standing behind new theater matters, and what's next. Douglas, I just want to thank you so much for joining me. How's it going?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I love podcasts, so I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Let's get right into it. So, before you were known as a playwright, audiences were first introduced to you as a Broadway actor. What originally inspired you to act?
I'm from New Haven, Connecticut. I grew up in the church, a PK, preacher's kid. So I grew up singing, and then I got into dancing school. I went to an arts magnet middle school. So I was studying dance, when I was like 12, 13 years old and started choreographing and things. And then the Schubert Theater, which is a touring house in New Haven, the national tours of Cats and Rent came through. And I asked my parents to get tickets. I didn't know, I wasn't like a Broadway kid. I didn't do show choir and all that stuff. But I got to see those tours come through, and I was like, "What is this? Why are these Jellicle cats dancing, and why is my heart beating?" So there was a connection with all of the training I had got in middle school and church, but I didn't know the collective art form of musical theater. And I got the bug very late. Like my senior year in high school, I heard about musical theater being a possibility. So that fall, I applied to four programs. Two were virtual auditions, and one program I got into. The only program was the Heart School, and that sort of kickstarted my journey. I did not know I was going to be an artist professionally, and it has been 22 years, 20 years officially, because I did the Rent tour at 19. I left school for a year and did that same Rent tour that came through New Haven, like 3 years later. But yeah, I got the bug over 20 years ago, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. What was your first Broadway show that you saw? Like go on
See,
Broadway?
this is really this memory wise. I think we took a school trip when I was in middle school to see Jekyll and Hyde, if I recall.
Okay, yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah.
Love that. Yes. Speaking of Broadway, you've appeared in Broadway shows like The Book of Mormon, Beautiful, excuse me, the Carole King musical, and let me just, can I resay that?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
do it,
thank
do
you.
it.
You've appeared in Broadway shows like The Book of Mormon, Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and Parade. Was there one show that taught you most as an artist?
Ooh, now that is a good question. I would say the show that taught me the most was Beautiful. It was my first original company. So I joined the Book of Mormon 6 weeks after they opened on Tony nomination morning. Um, that was my Broadway debut at 24, but Beautiful was like the full experience. So I had auditioned, all the callbacks, booked the show, did the out of town tryout in San Francisco. We weren't confirmed to go to Broadway. During that run, we got, the notification that we were going to Broadway. It was very exciting. And Beautiful, I was on stage. In Book of Mormon, I was a swing off stage. So I got to be on stage, and then we transferred to Broadway. I put up the show there and all the press and doing Good Morning America and the Tony Awards and the cast album. It was like the full throttle. And then on top of that, I was backstage at a 45-minute break during the show. And that's when I started writing seriously. When I found out, it was very influenced by Carole King stories, like becoming a musician. And I had been writing music with a writing partner I had met on the road on Book of Mormon. But I started writing more music and script and really experimenting with storytelling because I had a 45-minute break during the show and I didn't want to just sit around and chit chat. And that kickstarted my writing career. So Beautiful was like this beautiful cocoon where I sort of gestated and then became a butterfly and found more about my artistry after that 6 year journey. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. So being both a writer and an actor, that's really cool that you were able to become a writer literally on Broadway. Like you were writing stuff while you were on Broadway. That's cool.
Well,
Um,
the best place to train is to, look around you. I say to any actor, even when you're acting, don't just focus on what you're doing, take in the whole room. So I, befriended the doorman and the automation like technicians. I would hang out with them. Costume people, hair people have become my friends from that contract. You got to take in the entire building because you just never know what you'll learn from them and what they can learn from you.
yeah. Being both a writer and an actor, how would you say your experience as an actor has shaped the way that you write dialogue or create characters?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in my room, this very office, acting with myself like a crazy person. And so I've come up with my own rhythm. Shakespeare has iambic pentameter, and a director I worked with said, there's a rhythm in the way that we speak. And so always pay attention to the lilt of the sentence. And I started doing that in my work. So I always say I act every part on the page in hopes of the script when it's delivered feeling very organic and natural in the mouths of actors. And so I think I do have an advantage because I know what a bad script looks like. So I'm trying not to write one. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying not to write one. And so I still get to act, but it's just me in my room. And then I get to watch actors bring it to life. And it's also a gift of handing them original roles. I just wrapped a new play, Mother, Daughter, Father, Son, with the great Tony Award winning Lillias White. And that role was written for her. And so to see her go through that rehearsal period and to build that and to land that in front of an audience is such a gift, in a way that I didn't expect.
Yeah, you being able to play with the characters and stuff. Have you ever thought about writing a character for yourself and putting yourself in one of your own shows?
I get asked this a lot, and honestly, because I've been so blessed to have an acting career that spanned now 20 years, literally, I'm okay. I'm okay for now. I kind of want to sit back and chill and not have to do 8 shows a week. It's a beast. So I'm sure I will write something for myself one day, but right now I like the service of writing for other people.
Yeah. Um, that's nice. Yeah, eventually. One day. I'll come
One
and
day.
I'll come and see it. Yeah. Chicken and Biscuits, we met through that actually. I went to see the premiere of it at Africa Performing Arts Center, which is about 30 minutes from me. You were there. It was pretty awesome. That's how we connected. Do you want to talk a little bit about Chicken and Biscuits, just the storyline and how you wrote it?
Yeah, it is a story around a funeral between two sisters who are having to bury their father. And Benita and Beverly, they don't get along. And they're oil and water. And you're watching all these different generations of this family come together and try to find a common ground on a day that's very stressful and very emotional for everyone. And it's a comedy. Black funerals are sort of comedy sellers. There's so many emotions at a Black funeral, and they're all articulated different ways. And so it felt like an opportunity to dramatize an experience that I have lived and seen so many times. And I'm so grateful that I wrote it because it is, become a Broadway show and now a staple in the regions. And I've lost count. There's been at least 40 or 50 productions of the show worldwide. There was just a production in London. So, yeah, it's a story of family and healing, comedy, mess, and sort of how we come together as a family, even when we don't initially gel.
Yeah. That being your first show that went to Broadway, do you want to talk a little bit about that experience and how that felt?
I mean, this came out of the pandemic. So I admit this with my full chest. There was a reckoning with George Floyd, being murdered, and that made Broadway pay attention to a lot of its blind spots and its lack of programming works by people of color. And so suddenly there was this movement of seven African American playwrights in one season, and I was blessed enough to be one of them. What I was not ready for was for it to happen off the heels of a pandemic where we had all been inside. And putting up that show in the pandemic, like you could not get in to see Chicken and Biscuits if you didn't show that you had been vaccinated. So the rules and the conditions of even putting up that show was wild. People don't know this, but we were actually on the top of another set, American Buffalo, because they had to push because of the pandemic. And so there were so many behind the scenes things that went into making that happen. And it was a miracle. But I could not have predicted it was going to happen. And suddenly, I went into the pandemic. The Beautiful closed in the fall of 2019. I was doing a musical, Five Guys Named Mo, that finished March 1st. And then 2 weeks later, we were in lockdown. And then 18 months later, I was on Broadway as a playwright. Like, what are you talking about? So I was shell shocked. I kept calling myself, Cinderella at the ball. I was just so honored to be next to Lynn Nottage, and all these Keenan, Scott. It just really, it was a wild time. It felt like a dream sequence, but I now am ready if that were to happen again, and I'm so grateful that it did.
Yeah. Um, Chicken and Biscuits is really funny, but it also explores themes of grief, family, faith, and acceptance. How are you able to find the balance between the comedy and the deeper emotional moments?
For sure, the Black culture specifically deals with heavy topics through comedy and laughter. There is going to be a joke about something in a very tense situation because it breaks the tension. And that is just something I grew up with. And so that language as a means for writing a play, I think is rare for people. But my new play, Mother, Daughter, Father, Son, has similar themes of family strife, loss, grief, but I love comedy. I grew up with it. I love Lucy, Family Matters. Like I studied it. And so it's the only way I know how to deal, to be honest with you, is through levity and through joy. It's my movement and my mission. And growing up in the Black church, I know what's funny. I've seen it. It's real.
Looking back, now, what do you think Chicken and Biscuits has taught you?
Trust my voice. Trust my voice. It is different. It is not for everybody. It is not for everyone in the American theater. And like, that's okay. But there are people I've traveled. I mean, the little girl who did it at Ephrata, I remember meeting her mother, the little girl who played Latrice, had to be like 12 or 13 years old, and her mother was crying. It's so much bigger than how successful the show is in New York, but it's the communities that these shows that I write represent. And if they come out to see them and if they feel seen, then I've done my job. So Chicken and Biscuits taught me, great, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but there are people literally all around the world that are loving it. And that to me is the most gratifying part of being an artist is that you create something that a stranger, is in tears watching by the end of the evening. What a compliment. What a gift.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about Table 17, just to talk about the plot and stuff for audiences?
Woo. Miss Table. Table 17 did you get a chance to see it?
Unfortunately, no, I need
Yeah,
to.
just to
I
see it. Oh,
bring it back.
hopefully there'll be more. I mean, Chicken and Biscuits was like the appetizer of my career and sort of taught me the ropes. Table 17 felt more like my sophomore year. And it is a story of two exes, Jada and Dallas, who were together for 5 years, engaged, and then broke up and have not spoken since. And on this particular day, the two of them are reuniting for dinner in front of the audience because Dallas has called Jada to dinner and we don't know why. So it's like the stakes are very high. We don't know where they are in their lives. We don't know if they're seeing other people. We don't know if they still love each other. And part of the exercise, pulled very much from like stand-up comedy, is that the characters can break the fourth wall and talk to the audience directly. So they can be in a scene talking, to their scene partner, but then have an aside, which is very Shakespearean. And our initial production was in 2024 at MCC. And last fall, we were at the Geffen Playhouse in LA. And in about 2 months, we will be playing in London at the Kiln Theater. And I am on high. I am I'm so excited. And I've never had a work take off in this way where it's played different markets, and these are like the largest theater markets in the world. And so, yeah, it's a three-person play. The third character, um, River slash Eric, plays multiple different roles in the story. The main one being the maitre d' of the evening when the two show up to the restaurant. But it's a rom-com, it's contemporary, it's universal love, but it's also specifically Black love. And I could not be prouder.
Yeah, it sounds very different from Chicken and Biscuits. What inspired you to tell such a more intimate, more two-person story?
For sure. It during the pandemic, I ran across this video of these two exes sitting down across from each other. I think it's like cut.com or something. They have the series of people unpacking their relationships. And there were lots of tears in this video, and they were asking each other, like, do you still love me? Or where do you think we went wrong? And I was like, oh my God, the emotional stakes of that video felt like a play. And so when I was approached by New Works Provincetown about a possible commission, I sent them that video and said, I think there's a play here. And they said, write it. And then I was like, oh, I really got to figure this out. And I did. And I did. And I wrote it. I finished Table 17 backstage at Parade on Broadway.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Um, Table 17 was named a New York Times critic pick. I know we shouldn't always listen to critics, but how did that recognition feel?
It was really warm. It was, it, funny enough, it was the polar opposite than Chicken and Biscuits because Chicken and Biscuits got kind of panned. I mean, we got mixed to negative reviews, whatever. But Table 17 across the board for the most part got a lot of love. But the show is also about a lot of love. And for me, it wasn't that the critics' pick was the definition of it being worthy, because I think everything we write and create, if it means something to us and it lands with an audience, is worthy. But it was a really solid recognition for me as a writer because I'm, multi hyphenate. And so when I first started writing, people were like, oh, he's a writer, sure, right? Because I've been acting. So it felt like I had sort of arrived and that my voice as a writer was being inducted and respected in a way. And that meant a lot to me. And mind you, I've written things since that don't get the same love. So you have to be prepared for all the criticism. But Table 17 is a very special play and experience. And I think it's changed all of our lives, of the people that are attached to it.
Looking at Chicken and Biscuits compared to Table 17, they seem pretty different on the surface, but deep down, they're both really just about relationships and being connected with one another. Do you think those are the kind of reoccurring themes and stories that you tell in your plays?
Yeah, my mission is joy. I typically focus on three topics, which is queer stories, Black stories, particularly women-led, women-centered, and then family. So, Polka Dots, the Cool Kids musical, is a show that I co-wrote 11 years ago. I worked on Fraggle Rock on Apple TV. I have the show Peter Pan. I'm adapting for Warner Brothers Happy Feet, the animated movie, into a stage musical with Michael Arden. And so I want to leave an audience with pure joy. That's just how I write. And I know it's not for everybody, but it's such a sad world many times that it's nice to pour some light into people's hearts. And I like us to be confronted with things that force us to figure our lives out. What happens when your ex calls you? What happens when your sister, who you hate, you have to unite to bury your father? Like, what is the tension that brings about the change? And that's something I'm constantly investigating with my work.
For Beau, could you just tell us about the plot and just so audiences and listeners can know what it's about? And
Yeah, Beau, you saw that one.
I,
No?
I did, I did.
You did. Okay. Um, Beau is a coming of age queer story. This actor musician, Ace Baker, has a band, and it's sort of a memory play, memory musical, because you're at this band's second album release, but over the evening, he's telling you the story of how he figured out his queerness and how he wrote the songs that you hear. And when he was 12 years old, he found out that he had a living grandfather that his single mother, Raven, had kept from him for all his life. And he wanted to know why. And so he spent 5 summers with this man who gave him music and legacy and love. And then he loses that man. And so it's a heartwarming, multi-generational story, again, about family, issues that collide, how music can heal, and how music can teach us about who we are as people.
What inspired you to write that one?
I was doing the Book of Mormon, and I got to go see once the musical with my buddy Steve because he was leading it. And I was like, actor musicians, what is this? I can't play anything, but oh my God, this is amazing. And I wanted to write, I was doing beautiful at the time. So I was being introduced to folk music. I was raised more on gospel and blues and R&B, but also this sort of folk country thing was in my ear as a result of doing Carole King. And so I was like, what if there was this band and they sort of are like James Taylor meets James Brown, and what would that sound like? And so it was a bit of me sort of asking questions. I'm trying to remember now, but I believe Beau was written before Chicken and Biscuits. Beau was the first script I ever wrote. And I was afraid to write book because I didn't want to fail. But I did it, and I'm glad I did. And then it took another eight, 9 years for it to be seen in New York. We did have a production at the Adirondack Theater Festival in 2019. But yeah, I take inspiration from everything, around us. I listen to a lot of podcasts, oddly enough, and watch a lot of interviews because it's the everyday experiences that are really palpable for good story.
Yeah. Um, Beau had the opportunity to transfer from Theater 154 to St. Luke's Theater during its off-Broadway run, and it was extended multiple times. What did those extensions and transfer mean to you?
Well, what's really fascinating is that by the end of the run, we became a Reddit TikTok show, which I'm giving you millennial, okay? I am not Gen Z or whatever comes after that. That's not me. So it was fascinating to see people going to TikTok and saying, I saw this show, you have to see it. It really meant something to me. And like months after, I saw this TikTok from Ricky Lake, who was like, I saw this show, Beau. It was really good. It was all over my feed. And I was like, holy balls. Okay, that's cool. Ricky Lake, I grew up watching you on TV. So I think the most impressive compliment as a writer is to know that what you have written resonates with people. It doesn't really matter. The critics help keep the show open and, give you full quotes for marketing purposes. But there's a lot of things that are critically acclaimed, but then not really, it doesn't really stay with people. And so the fact that Beau found an audience so much so that we transferred, and by the end, that closing performance, we had to turn people away. That is really meaningful to me because it's been my baby darling for a long time.
Yeah. Um, you've been an advocate for developing original theater for a while. Why do you think it's so important for audiences to take chances on new shows?
Because in like 40 years, it's going to be boring. Like how many, I love, hello, Dolly. I love Shakespeare, but we're not pouring into the new generation of writers. We're not creating a new canon. And I'm sorry, but a 90-year-old right now should not have the same offerings as a 9-year-old in 10, 15 years from now. Like theater is supposed to evolve. There's supposed to be new generations and new stories. And so if we become so revived in our thinking, revival culture being the only way that there's quality theater, we're not trusting our new writers. Why are we writing? Why am I spending hours in this room creating if you all are not going to take the chance? And so I think theater can just get boring if we don't realize it now because some things come back and they sell very well on stuff. But in 20 years, I don't know if Man of La Mancha is going to speak to the kids.
Yeah.
It's a classic, but The kids now know Spring Awakening, you know. Um, they know Cat's the Jellicle Ball because of the way it was done, right? So that's the I just feel like if we're not pouring into the new, our art form will fizzle. It'll just become ashy and boring.
Yeah, I think people forget that these classics that are so loved were once original productions that nobody had ever seen and that nobody you have to give the shows a chance for them to become classics and for them to be loved over time. It's like nobody's giving these new shows chances.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's like let something become a classic. Like I would love a season where every show on Broadway was an original work.
Yeah, that would be great.
Like that's what we deserve. That's what the art form deserves. I wonder how Shakespeare feels in his grave. If he's like, yes, please do my play from centuries ago once more. Or he's like, I've had my time. And I think as writers, we have to keep earning our time. We should keep having to pour into the canon. So yeah, don't get me to preaching because I will not stop talking.
Okay, let's change topics then. You, you've experienced what it takes to build a new show from the ground up. What is something that you wish audiences understood about the developmental process that they don't always get to see?
They are integral to it. So this new play I just had up at the Adirondack Theater Festival, I stayed for two additional performances after opening to see where their laughter was consistent. I sat in the back of the house, I moved seats, I heard sniffles, I was looking, for when people get fidgety. It's not just how good the show is, it's does the audience want the show and what do they care about in the story? So for me as a writer, I'm not just looking for how full the house is. I'm looking to see when they all laugh together or when someone leaned forward. What are those moments? The audience actually teaches the theater a lot about what a show can be because there may be a song or a character that you're like, oh, that song was a bad song. And then it gets the most, the largest applause. And you're like, oh, wait, they really love that song, right? So the audience just teaches us what we should be doing with the theater, which is why we have previews, which like TV and film don't get that opportunity, but theater, as creatives, we get to come in and sit and listen and learn actively so we can make the show better.
Yeah, theaters every night it's always changing and you can always take notes and get better. It's always you can always improve. Um,
Yes.
do you want to talk a little bit about Happy Feet?
I can't say too much because we're just started on our journey, but there will be penguins because it's about penguins. And I've been working on it since the fall of 2023. I got it during parade, and I think it is going to be a fantastic four quadrant family show, adult show about relationships and being unique and the celebration of what it is to be different.
Yeah, I love that. Do you want to tell us where people can find you online as we wrap up?
For sure. I'm on douglaslyons.net. You can look me up and check out all the things happening. I am at Chocolate Hipster on Instagram and Douglas Sings on Twitter. I don't really use Twitter. But yeah, I'm around and creating things. I have a couple other new projects, Mother, Daughter, Father, Son. I have a show, my first sort of show running experience, a show called Famously You, which is coming out on Roku. It's a variety show based on the famous Amos cookie brand, which is really cool. I have a play, Pure Glitter, that is making its way around the regions. Outfront Theater Company in Atlanta is doing it next year. A play, Don't Touch My Hair, that's also been making its way around the regions. And I feel like there's one more, but maybe that's it. I'm doing a lot of things, aren't we all? But I love being creative and working on something new, every year. So we'll see what my next thing is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure hearing about your journey from Broadway to becoming a Broadway playwright, working on Beautiful, Chicken and Biscuits, Table 17, Book of Mormon. Too many Broadway credits. What was the other one? Parade. Parade.
Parade, yeah.
Um, I appreciate you taking the time to share your stories with me and your creative process and hearing about your passion for pushing new art out. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Broadway Buzz. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow the podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. You can also follow us on Instagram at Bway Buzz Podcast for more interviews, Broadway news, and behind the scenes content. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Broadway Buzz. Thanks, Douglas.
Thank you.